The morning started like any other Tuesday in March. Coffee shops were busy, traffic jams clogged the highways, and people rushed to work. Then everything changed. Admiral Jake Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee when the alarms started, screaming through the Luna command station. Red lights flashed across every wall and screen. The duty officer ran toward him with sweat dripping down his face. "Sir, we have contacts at the edge of the solar system. Lots of them." Jake set down his coffee and walked to the main display screen. What he saw made his blood turn cold. Hundreds of dark shapes were moving toward Earth. They were massive, each one bigger than any ship humanity had ever built. The shapes looked strange, almost alive, with curves and bumps like giant sea creatures floating through space. "How many?" Jake asked. "Over 300 confirmed, sir. More are still appearing." Jake grabbed the communications device. "This is Admiral Morrison to all Earth defense ships, battle stations. This is not a drill." Across the solar system, human ships began moving into position. The Earth defense fleet had 50 major warships and over 200 smaller vessels. It seemed like a lot until Jake looked at the enemy fleet again. They were outnumbered 6-1. Captain Lisa Reynolds commanded the destroyer Falcon near Mars orbit. She watched the alien ships on her screens and felt her heart beating fast. The enemy vessels moved in perfect formation, like they had done this 1,000 times before. "Captain, we're getting a transmission," her communications officer said. "It's coming from the lead alien ship." "Put it on screen." The face that appeared was not human. It had scales instead of skin, yellow eyes like a snake, and teeth sharp enough to cut metal. When it spoke, the voice was deep and cold. "I am War Master Thexvar of the Draconian Empire. Your species has been selected for consumption. You have 1 solar rotation to surrender your military forces and prepare for harvesting. Resistance will result in complete destruction." The transmission ended. Lisa stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to her crew. "Well, that was friendly," she said. "All weapons ready. Let's show these lizards what humans think about their offer." On Earth, Dr. Alex Carter was working late in his laboratory when the emergency broadcast interrupted every television and radio station. He watched the alien message 3 times, studying every detail of the creature's face and words. Alex was a scientist who studied alien life, though until today, no one had found any. He grabbed his phone and called his assistant. "Helen, did you see the broadcast?" "Everyone saw it, Alex. The whole world is going crazy. I need you to record everything, every transmission, every piece of data about these Draconians. If we survive this, we'll need to understand them." The first battle happened 18 hours later. The human fleet met the Draconian ships near Jupiter. Jake Morrison commanded from the battleship Liberty, the most powerful vessel in the Earth defense fleet. "All ships fire at will," Jake ordered. The space around Jupiter lit up with explosions and laser beams. Human missiles and energy weapons struck the alien ships, but the results were disappointing. The Draconian vessels had shields that seemed to absorb most of the damage. When the aliens fired back, their weapons cut through human ships like paper. Lisa watched in horror as the cruiser Atlanta exploded next to her. 300 people died in an instant. The Falcon shook as alien energy beams passed close by. "Their shields are too strong," she reported to Jake. "Our weapons barely hurt them." "Keep firing," Jake replied, but he knew they were in trouble. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, humanity had lost 23 ships. The Draconians had lost 2. It was not a fair fight. On Earth, people watched the news reports with growing fear. The alien fleet was now moving toward the inner solar system. Military leaders held emergency meetings. Scientists worked around the clock trying to understand the alien technology. Colonel Pete Williams was in charge of defending Washington, D.C. He stood on the roof of the Pentagon, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, an alien army was coming to destroy everything he had sworn to protect. "Sir," his aide said, "General Stone wants to see you in the bunker." Pete nodded and followed the young soldier underground. Deep beneath the Pentagon, General Karen Stone was coordinating the global defense effort. Maps covered the walls, showing troop movements and evacuation plans. Pete We need to face facts, Karen said. We can't stop them in space. They'll reach Earth in 3 days. We need to prepare for ground warfare. What about the civilians? We're evacuating the major cities, but there's not enough time to save everyone. This is going to be bad. Dr. Alex Carter was still in his laboratory when the first alien ships entered Earth's atmosphere. Through his window, he could see bright streaks of light as the Draconian vessels descended toward the planet's surface. Each ship was the size of a city block. The aliens had studied human languages and cultures during their approach. Their first attacks targeted military bases and government buildings with surgical precision. But they also did something else. They sent a message to every television, radio, and internet connection on Earth. Your military forces have been defeated. Your leaders cannot protect you. Submit to the Draconian Empire and your deaths will be swift. Continue to resist and your suffering will be legendary. Alex turned off his computer and gathered his research notes. The aliens wanted humans to give up hope, to believe that resistance was useless. He thought about all the history books he had read, all the stories of people who fought against impossible odds. Not today, he said to himself. Outside, the bombing had begun. The sky glowed orange as the alien ships destroyed everything that might be used to fight back. But in hidden bunkers and secret bases around the world, humans were already planning their next move. The Draconians thought they knew how this would end. They had conquered dozens of worlds before Earth. Every species followed the same pattern: initial resistance, then collapse, then surrender. But they had never fought humans before. They did not understand that humans had a word for fighting when victory seemed impossible. They called it hope. 3 months had passed since the Draconians arrived. The world looked very different now. Giant alien ships hung in the sky above every major city like dark clouds that never moved. The creatures had built massive structures on the ground, strange towers that hummed with energy and cast purple light across the landscape. War Master Thexvar stood in his command center aboard the flagship Dominator. He was 12 feet tall with dark green scales and claws that could tear through steel. His yellow eyes stared at the reports coming in from across the planet. Something was wrong. Commander Zexta, explain these casualty numbers to me, Thexvar said to his second-in-command. The smaller Draconian looked nervous. War Master, we have lost 347 warriors in the past week alone. The humans continue to attack our positions despite having no chance of victory. Thexvar crushed the metal report tablet in his claws. In the conquest of the Altarian system, they had lost only 12 warriors total. On Kepler Prime, the entire population surrendered after seeing their capital city destroyed. But these humans kept fighting. Show me the tactical database for conquered species, Thexvar ordered. The holographic display showed the conquest patterns for 57 different worlds. Every single one followed the same path. Initial resistance for 7 to 14 days, then rapid collapse as the population realized they could not win. The longest any species had continued organized resistance was 23 days. Earth had been fighting for 92 days. Lieutenant Commander Nick Barnes crouched behind a pile of rubble that used to be the Chicago City Hall. His team of 12 soldiers waited for his signal. They had been planning this mission for 2 weeks, watching the Draconian patrol patterns and studying their equipment. Remember, we need one of their scouts alive, Nick whispered into his radio. Intelligence needs to study their technology. The alien patrol came right on schedule. 3 Draconian warriors in powered armor walked down what used to be Michigan Avenue. They were 8 feet tall and carried weapons that could melt a tank, but they were also predictable. They took the same route every day at exactly the same time. Nick's team had prepared carefully. They used the city's old sewer system to place explosive charges along the patrol route. When the aliens reached the kill zone, Nick pressed the detonator. The explosion knocked all 3 Draconians down. Before they could recover, Nick's soldiers were on them. It took 6 humans to hold down 1 alien, even when it was injured. The fight was brutal and desperate, but when it ended, they had their prize. Marine Sergeant Amy Foster was part of the team that studied the captured Draconian equipment. She had been a mechanic before the war and understood how things worked. The alien armor was incredibly advanced, but as she took it apart piece by piece, she noticed something interesting. "Dr. Murphy, look at this," Amy said, pointing to a small device inside the armor's helmet. "I think this is some kind of computer." Dr. Helen Murphy was one of the few scientists still working in the ruins of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The aliens had bombed most of the universities, but they had missed the underground laboratories. She examined the device Amy had found. "It's definitely a computer, but it's unlike anything we've ever seen. The processing patterns are completely different from human technology." They worked for hours trying to understand the alien device. Finally, Helen managed to access its memory banks. What they found changed everything. The computer contained detailed files on hundreds of different alien species, battle plans, weapon specifications, and conquest strategies for dozens of worlds. Every file showed the same pattern that Thexvar had been studying: quick victory through overwhelming force, followed by rapid surrender. But there was something else. The computer had been trying to create a tactical profile for humans, and it was failing. The device kept generating error messages and conflicting data. "Amy, look at this," Helen said, pointing to the screen. "Their computer can't figure us out. It keeps trying to predict human behavior based on other species, but we don't fit the pattern." Captain Roy Jensen led a group of survivors in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. They had been fighting a guerrilla war against the Draconians, hitting supply convoys and communication posts. Roy had been a park ranger before the invasion, so he knew the mountains better than anyone. His radio crackled to life. It was Colonel Williams calling from the underground Pentagon bunker. "Roy, we need you to coordinate with similar groups worldwide. Intelligence suggests the aliens are having trouble dealing with multiple small attacks." "Copy that, Pete. We've been making contact with resistance cells in Canada and Mexico. The aliens seem confused when we hit them from different directions at the same time." Roy understood why. The Draconians were used to fighting organized armies with clear command structures. They could defeat a military force by destroying its leaders and communication centers. But the human resistance had no single leader to kill, no central base to destroy. When one group was eliminated, 10 more took its place. Dr. Alex Carter had been hiding in a secret laboratory beneath the ruins of Los Angeles. He spent his days listening to intercepted Draconian communications and trying to understand their language. What he discovered was disturbing. The aliens were talking to each other more frequently than before. Their messages showed signs of confusion and frustration. They kept requesting new tactical data from their home worlds, asking for advice on how to deal with the Earth problem. Alex translated one particular message that made him smile despite everything. "Request immediate guidance on human psychological warfare tactics. Enemy continues combat operations despite mathematical certainty of defeat. Current conquest models inadequate. Recommend species reclassification." The Draconians were asking their leaders to change Earth's classification from easy conquest to something else. They had never encountered a species that refused to accept the obvious reality of their situation. Meanwhile, in hidden bunkers around the world, human scientists were learning from every encounter with the aliens. Each captured piece of technology, each recorded communication, each observed behavior pattern added to their understanding. Dr. Helen Murphy discovered that Draconian weapons were designed to counter specific types of armor and shielding used by other galactic civilizations. But human military equipment had developed along completely different lines. Earth's isolation meant that human technology was unlike anything the Draconians had ever encountered. The aliens' tactical computers could not predict human responses because humans had never followed galactic standard military doctrine. Every assumption the Draconians made about human behavior was wrong. War Master Thexvar received a communication from the Draconian High Command. His superiors were not pleased with the slow progress on Earth. They reminded him that he had been given enough forces to conquer 10 worlds. They wanted to know why one primitive planet was taking so long. Thexvar looked out at the burning cities below his ship. The humans were still fighting. After 3 months of constant bombardment, after losing every major battle, after seeing their civilization destroyed, they were still fighting. For the first time in his military career, Thexvar felt something he had never experienced before. He felt uncertain. 6 months after the invasion began, the impossible happened. Colonel Steve Adams and Major Diana Wells stood on a hill overlooking what used to be Denver, Colorado. Below them, smoke rose from the wreckage of an entire Draconian ground division. 50 alien vehicles destroyed, over 200 Draconian warriors dead. "I still can't believe it worked," Diana said, lowering her binoculars. Steve smiled grimly. "Sometimes the simplest plans are the best ones." The battle had started when the Draconians sent their standard ground assault force to clear out human resistance in the Rocky Mountains. Their tactical computers had calculated exactly how many troops they needed, based on data from similar operations on other worlds. They brought enough firepower to destroy a conventional army 3 times larger than the human force they expected to face. But the humans had not fought conventionally. Instead of meeting the aliens in open battle, Steve and Diana had used old mining explosives to collapse 3 mountain passes at exactly the right moment. The Draconian column found itself trapped in a narrow valley with no way out. Then the humans had attacked from above using hunting rifles and homemade bombs. The aliens had superior weapons and armor, but they could not shoot what they could not see. The humans knew every cave and trail in the mountains. They appeared, fired a few shots, then vanished like ghosts. The Draconians had trained to fight other armies, not invisible enemies who refused to stay in one place. War Master Thexvar received the report about the Denver disaster in his command center. He read it 3 times before accepting that it was real. An entire division destroyed by a few hundred humans with primitive weapons. "How is this possible?" he roared at his communications officer. "War Master, our ground commanders report that human tactics are impossible to predict. They do not follow any known military doctrine." Thexvar activated his private communication link to the Draconian High Command. He needed reinforcements, but he also needed to explain why the conquest of Earth was taking so long. The face that appeared on his screen belonged to Supreme Commander Veltaran, the highest-ranking military officer in the Draconian Empire. Veltaran had personally overseen the conquest of 23 star systems. "Thexvar, your reports are disturbing. No species has ever required additional forces beyond the initial invasion fleet. Explain yourself." "Supreme Commander, the humans are unlike any species we have previously encountered. Their resistance patterns do not match our tactical databases." Veltaran's yellow eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting that our conquest protocols are flawed?" "No, Supreme Commander. I am suggesting that these humans are flawed. They continue fighting despite mathematical certainty of defeat." There was a long pause. Finally, Veltaran spoke again. "Thexvar, our databases contain tactical information on over 300 intelligent species across the galaxy. All of them follow predictable behavioral patterns. If you cannot defeat one primitive world with the forces at your disposal, perhaps the problem lies with your leadership." The communication ended. Thexvar stared at the blank screen, feeling something he had never experienced before: fear. Not fear of the humans, but fear of failure. Fear of being the first war master in Draconian history to lose a conquest. Dr. Alex Carter had moved his laboratory to an abandoned subway tunnel beneath New York City. The underground location kept him safe from orbital bombardment, while he continued studying Draconian communications. What he discovered made him call an emergency meeting with the other resistance leaders. "The aliens are scared," he announced to the group of military officers and scientists gathered around his computer screen. General Karen Stone looked skeptical. "Scared? They have orbital supremacy and technology centuries ahead of ours." "Yes, but look at their recent communications," Alex said, pointing to translated messages on his screen. "They're asking their homeworlds for tactical advice that has never been needed before. They're requesting psychological profiles on species that refuse to surrender. They're even questioning their own battle doctrines." Dr. Helen Murphy nodded, in agreement. She had been studying captured Draconian equipment for months. "Alex is right. Their technology is designed to fight conventional galactic warfare, but we're not a galactic civilization. We developed in isolation, so our methods are completely foreign to them. Commander Ellen Price had been leading space-based resistance operations from a hidden asteroid base. She had successfully captured 3 Draconian communication satellites in the past month. The intercepted messages confirm what Alex is saying, Ellen reported. The Draconians are talking about Earth as a special case. They're using words that translate roughly to impossible situation and unprecedented challenge. Dr. Paul Mitchell, a psychologist who had been studying human and alien behavior patterns, offered his analysis. The Draconians have been successful because they understand how civilizations think. When faced with overwhelming force, most species make rational decisions to minimize casualties. But humans don't always make rational decisions. You mean we're crazy? Asked Major Wells. Not crazy, stubborn. Every other species they've conquered had centralized governments that could make surrender decisions for their entire population. But humans have thousands of different groups, each making independent choices. Even if some surrender, others keep fighting. Dr. Susan Clark, who had been analyzing Draconian military psychology, added her observations. Their entire culture is based on the idea that superior force guarantees victory. They've never encountered sustained resistance from an inferior enemy. It challenges their fundamental beliefs about how the universe works. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent radio message from Captain Roy Jensen in Colorado. All stations, this is Mountain Base. We just intercepted a priority communication from the main alien ship. They're requesting immediate reinforcements from their home fleet. The room fell silent. If the Draconians were calling for help, it meant they were admitting that their original force was not enough to conquer Earth. War Master Thexvar stood before the holographic image of Supreme Commander Veltaran once again. This time, 3 other high command officers were present. Thexvar could feel their disappointment across the vast distance of space. War Master, you have now been fighting on this one world for 6 months. Veltaran said coldly. Our historical records show that no previous conquest has lasted longer than 25 days. Explain this failure. Thexvar chose his words carefully. Supreme Commander, the humans possess a psychological trait that does not exist in our databases. They continue organized resistance despite suffering massive casualties and having no realistic hope of victory. Impossible, stated War Master Kethvar, another member of the High Command. All intelligent species possess survival instincts that prevent self-destructive behavior. With respect, War Master Kethvar, I have observed this behavior personally. Human military units will fight to complete annihilation rather than surrender. Their civilian populations rebuild resistance networks faster than we can destroy them. They treat certain defeat as a challenge rather than a reason to submit. The High Command officers exchanged glances. Supreme Commander Veltaran spoke for all of them. These claims are so far outside normal parameters that we question their accuracy. However, we will send a small reinforcement fleet to assist you. But understand this, Thexvar. If you cannot complete this conquest with additional forces, you will be replaced. After the communication ended, Thexvar walked to the observation deck of his ship. Below him, the lights of human cities still glowed in the darkness. After 6 months of constant bombing, after losing every major battle, after having their military forces scattered and their governments destroyed, the humans were still down there, still fighting, still refusing to accept the inevitable. For the first time in his long military career, War Master Thexvar began to wonder if the inevitable was really inevitable after all. 1 year after the invasion began, everything changed. General Karen Stone emerged from the deep underground bunker, where she had been coordinating global resistance efforts. The woman who walked into the morning sunlight looked older and harder than the one who had gone underground 12 months ago. Around her, the ruins of Washington, D.C. stretched to the horizon. The White House was gone. The Capitol building was a pile of melted stone. But human flags still flew from hidden positions throughout the city. The Draconians had destroyed the buildings, but they had not destroyed the spirit of the people inside them. All resistance commanders, this is General Stone, she spoke into her radio. Operation Comeback begins now. Across the globe, thousands of humans who had been hiding and planning for months began to move. The counteroffensive that everyone said was impossible was about to begin. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded what was left of the Earth Defense Fleet from a hidden base on the far side of the moon. Over the past year, his engineers had been working around the clock to build new ships from salvaged materials and captured alien technology. The fleet was smaller than when the war started, but it was also smarter. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Today we take back our home. The new human ships looked strange. They were built using a combination of human engineering and stolen Draconian technology. Dr. Helen Murphy and her team had spent months learning how alien systems worked, but instead of copying them exactly, they had found ways to make them better. The breakthrough had come when engineer Tom Bradley discovered that Draconian shield generators made mathematical assumptions about the types of weapons they would face. The aliens had fought so many battles across the galaxy that they thought they knew every possible weapon design. They were wrong. Dr. Murphy and physicist Kate Rogers had developed something entirely new. They called it a quantum disruptor, though the name was less important than what it did. When human ships fired these new weapons at Draconian shields, the shields simply stopped working. The first test came when Admiral Morrison's fleet attacked, a Draconian orbital platform above Earth. The alien commanders watched their sensors in disbelief as human weapons passed through their shields like they were not there. "Impossible," muttered the platform commander just before his station exploded. On the ground, Sergeant Amy Foster led a unit she had created called the Dragon Hunters. These were soldiers who specialized in fighting Draconians in close combat. Amy had studied every piece of alien equipment they had captured and found weaknesses that the aliens did not know existed. Draconian warriors were individually stronger than humans. Their armor was better. Their weapons were more powerful. But they had one critical flaw. They could not adapt quickly to new situations. "Remember," Amy told her team as they prepared for their mission, "these lizards have been fighting the same way for centuries. They expect us to act like every other species they've conquered. When we do something unexpected, their training works against them." The Dragon Hunters had developed tactics that no military academy would have taught. They used mirrors to confuse alien sensors. They made noise in one direction while attacking from another. They even used recordings of animal sounds to make the aliens think they were being attacked by Earth's wildlife. It worked because the Draconians had never faced enemies who fought like this. Their tactical computers could not process human behavior patterns, so they made mistakes. And when Draconians made mistakes, they died. Colonel Steve Adams stood on the command deck of a captured Draconian ship that humans had renamed the Liberty. His target was the largest alien vessel in Earth orbit, War Master Thexvar's flagship, the Dominator. The attack plan was insane. It involved launching the Liberty directly at the Dominator at maximum speed, then using teleporter technology stolen from the aliens to board the enemy ship. No sane military commander would attempt such a strategy. But Steve Adams was no longer entirely sane. None of the humans were. A year of fighting an impossible war had changed them all. "All teams ready?" Steve asked. "Ready, sir," came the replies. From dozens of boarding teams throughout the Liberty accelerated toward the Dominator like a missile. Draconian defensive systems fired at the approaching ship, but the modified human shields held. At the last moment just before impact, teleporter beams activated throughout the Liberty. 300 human soldiers materialized inside the Dominator's corridors. The Draconians had never experienced a boarding action like this. Their ship was designed to repel external attacks, not to fight enemies who suddenly appeared inside their defensive perimeter. War Master Thexvar was in his command center when the alarms began screaming. His tactical display showed impossible readings. Human soldiers were fighting inside his ship. "How did they get aboard?" he roared. "Unknown, War Master. They simply appeared in multiple locations simultaneously." Thexvar grabbed his personal weapons and headed for the battle. He was a warrior, not just a commander. If his ship was going to fall, he would die fighting. He found Colonel Adams in the main corridor, fighting 3 Draconian guards with nothing but a military knife in his bare hands. Adams moved like a wild animal, unpredictable and vicious. The Draconians were stronger, but Adams was faster and more desperate. When Thexvar joined the fight, Adams turned to face him with eyes that showed no fear. The human was bleeding from multiple wounds, but he smiled as if this was exactly where he wanted to be. "You're the big boss, aren't you?" Adams said. "Good. I've been wanting to meet you." The fight between Thexvar and Adams lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. The Draconian War Master was 12 feet tall and had claws that could cut through steel. Adams was a human who had been eating scraps and hiding in ruins for a year, but Adams had something Thexvar did not understand. He had absolutely nothing left to lose. When it ended, War Master Thexvar lay dead on the deck of his own ship. "Colonel." Adams stood over him, badly wounded but alive. Around them, human soldiers were systematically taking control of the most powerful Draconian vessel in the solar system. "This is Colonel Adams to all units," he spoke into his radio. "The Dominator is ours." The psychological impact of losing their flagship and their supreme commander broke something fundamental in the Draconian invasion force. These aliens had conquered dozens of worlds through the certainty of their own superiority. But humans had just proven in the most dramatic way possible that Draconians could be beaten. Dr. Alex Carter intercepted the emergency communications flying between Draconian ships. The translations made him laugh out loud despite his exhaustion. "Request immediate evacuation authorization. Command structure compromised. Enemy capabilities exceed all known parameters. Recommend immediate withdrawal to minimum safe distance." The Draconians were asking permission to run away. Within hours, alien ships began leaving Earth orbit. Some tried to make organized retreats. Others simply fled in panic. The humans pursued them with their new hybrid ships, capturing or destroying every vessel they could catch. Admiral Morrison watched from the bridge of his flagship as the last major Draconian vessel disappeared into the darkness of space. After 1 year of seemingly hopeless war, Earth was free. But as he would soon discover, this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of something much larger and more significant than anyone could have imagined. The humans had not just won a war. They had broken something that the Draconians thought was unbreakable, the absolute certainty that superior technology guaranteed victory. And across the galaxy, other civilizations were starting to hear rumors about the impossible thing that had happened in a small star system at the edge of nowhere. 18 months after the invasion began, the last Draconian ship fled from Earth's solar system. But Admiral Ellen Price was not content to simply watch them leave. She commanded a fleet of 20 human vessels, all built using captured alien technology and human ingenuity. "All ships pursue and engage," Ellen ordered. "We're not letting them run home to tell their friends about us." The chase lasted 3 weeks and covered dozens of star systems. The fleeing Draconians had superior speed, but the human ships had something else. They refused to give up. Every time the aliens thought they had escaped, human vessels appeared, behind them like persistent shadows. Captain Roy Jensen piloted the lead pursuit ship, a modified destroyer that his crew had nicknamed the Stubborn. He had been tracking the aliens through hyperspace using navigation computers stolen from their own ships. "Admiral, we're approaching the edge of Draconian space," Roy reported. "Long-range sensors detect a massive fleet ahead." Ellen studied the tactical display. Hundreds of Draconian ships were gathered around a fortified space station. It was clearly a major military base, probably where the fleeing ships hoped to find protection. "All ships hold position," Ellen commanded. "Let's see what they do." What happened next would become legendary among human spacers for generations to come. The fleeing Draconian ships approached their own fleet, broadcasting emergency signals and requesting immediate assistance. But instead of welcoming them back, the Draconian fleet opened fire. Dr. Alex Carter was aboard the human flagship, monitoring alien communications. What he heard made him call Ellen to the bridge immediately. "Admiral, you need to hear this," Alex said, activating the translation program. "The base commander is refusing to let the fleeing ships dock. He's accusing them of being infected with some kind of human psychological weapon." Ellen listened to the translated conversation with growing amazement. The Draconian base commander was convinced that any ship that had fled from Earth must be compromised somehow. He believed that humans had developed a way to make Draconian warriors afraid, and he was not going to let that fear spread to his own forces. "Sir, the fleeing ships are being destroyed by their own people," reported the sensor operator. Ellen watched in stunned silence as the Draconian fleet systematically destroyed every ship that had escaped from Earth. The aliens were so terrified of human influence that they were killing their own survivors rather than risk contamination. Captain Nick Barnes was monitoring communications from his scout ship when he detected something incredible. The Draconian base was sending a priority message to their high command, and Alex Carter was translating it in real time. "Command Authority. This is Fortress Veltara. We have confirmed reports of catastrophic defeat at Sol System. Recommend immediate establishment of exclusion zone. Human species classification requires urgent revision. Details cannot be transmitted securely. Physical examination of evidence required for verification." Ellen realized what she was witnessing. The Draconians were not just afraid of humans. They were afraid to even talk about what had happened at Earth. The defeat had been so impossible, so far outside their understanding of warfare, that they could not accept it as real. "Admiral," Alex said quietly, "they're not going to report back to their high command. They literally cannot process what happened here." The human fleet watched as the Draconian base began a full military withdrawal. Hundreds of ships, thousands of warriors, an entire fortress complex. All of it abandoned rather than risk any contact with the ships that had fled from Earth. Dr. Helen Murphy was in her laboratory aboard the flagship, studying data they had collected during the pursuit. What she discovered changed everything humans thought they knew about the Draconian Empire. "Ellen, look at this," Helen called to the Admiral. "I've been analyzing the navigation data from captured ships. The Draconians did not just conquer a few worlds. They control over 300 star systems." "That's a lot," Ellen said, "but what does it matter now?" "It matters because their entire empire is based on one principle. They never lose. Every species they encounter follows the same pattern. Initial resistance, then surrender. But we broke that pattern." Helen brought up a galactic map showing Draconian territories. "Their whole civilization is built around the idea that superior technology guarantees victory. When we proved that wrong, we did not just defeat an invasion fleet, we destroyed the foundation of their entire culture." The proof came over the following months as human exploration ships ventured deeper into space. They found abandoned Draconian worlds everywhere. Entire planets evacuated in panic. Military bases left empty with equipment still running. Space stations drifting through the void with no one aboard. Captain Steve Adams led the first human expedition to a former Draconian colony world. What they found was both amazing and disturbing. The planet had been abandoned so quickly that meals were still sitting on tables in the empty cities. "It's like they just vanished," Steve reported back to Earth. "There are no signs of battle, no evidence of destruction. They just left everything and ran." Dr. Paul Mitchell, the psychologist who had studied Draconian behavior, offered an explanation that no one wanted to believe. The Draconians had based their entire identity on being unbeatable. When we beat them, we did not just win a war. We proved that their fundamental beliefs about the universe were wrong. For a civilization that had existed for thousands of years without ever experiencing defeat. This was not just a military loss. It was a complete psychological collapse. The evidence supported his theory. Human scouts found abandoned Draconian equipment scattered across dozens of star systems. Ships that had been functioning perfectly were simply left drifting in space. Weapon stockpiles were abandoned. Entire fleets had been deserted by crews who could no longer face the possibility of fighting an enemy that refused to lose. Admiral Morrison established the first human colony beyond Earth, in what used to be Draconian space. The planet had breathable air and fertile soil, but it also had something else. Massive databases containing information about hundreds of alien civilizations. Dr. Alex Carter spent months studying these files. What he learned was both exciting and terrifying. "We're not alone," he announced in his final report to Earth Command. "There are thousands of intelligent species in the galaxy, but most of them are hiding from each other, afraid to risk contact because they've all heard stories about the Draconians." The galaxy, it turned out, had been living in fear for centuries. The Draconian Empire had been like a massive bully, keeping everyone else quiet and submissive. But when the bully was defeated by a species that was supposed to be weak and primitive, everything changed. Contact came slowly at first, a single ship from the Altarian Republic approaching Earth with messages of friendship and trade offers. Then more arrived, representatives from the Kepler Alliance, ambassadors from the Centauri Federation, dozens of civilizations that had been hiding in the shadows for generations. They all wanted to meet the species that had done the impossible. They wanted to understand how humans had defeated the unbeatable Draconians. They wanted to learn about the warriors who fought even when victory was mathematically impossible. Ellen Price, now commanding the first human deep space exploration fleet, received a communication that made her smile. It was from a species called the Vorthon, who had been enslaved by the Draconians for over 200 years. "Human friends," the message began, "we have heard the stories of your great victory. We do not understand how you defeated the Draconians, but we want to learn. Will you teach us how to be brave like humans?" The title of the old war reports had proven prophetic. When the Draconians invaded Earth, no one came back to tell what happened. No Draconian had returned to tell their high command about the defeat, because what happened was so far beyond their understanding that it could not be communicated. An empire built on absolute certainty had encountered something that challenged every assumption they had ever made about power, victory, and the nature of intelligent life. The humans had not just won a war, they had become something entirely new in galactic history. The species that refused to accept defeat, even when defeat was the only logical option. And across the galaxy, other civilizations were learning that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe was simply the refusal to give up hope.